it's lavины.
A public avalanche bulletin is basically a compilation of information that's spelled out in English as to what the conditions are like in the backcountry.
Basically, what sort of dangers are we looking at?
The forecaster and a team of wardens will go out during the day to selected locations to make snowpack and weather observations. We come back to the office at the end of the day, collaborate with our colleagues, and then we write the bulletin from there. In addition to these fixed study plots here, we also go out into the backcountry and we'll run test profiles to get more of a feel for what the snowpack is doing and the weather is doing throughout the mountain range.
The information that we use to produce avalanche forecasts comes from what we call the InfoX, or Information Exchange.
Which is a daily exchange of weather, snowpack, and avalanche observations from hundreds of different heli-ski operations, cat ski operations, Ministry of Transportation, snow avalanche programs.
So today, our team of forecasters is out here checking out this slide and doing an accident investigation. In northern BC, it's some heli-ski operation. There's a bunch of guides collecting information about a snowpack. In Whistler, the patrollers are out there doing their thing. And at the end of the day, everybody will come back to their computer, submit all that data, and then every avalanche professional across Western Canada will be able to pull that up on their computer tomorrow morning.
We post our bulletins on our website at avalanche.ca, and they're also obtained through a toll-free number that you can call up and get all the bulletin regions. A lot of the bulletins are posted at backcountry access areas on ski hills.
The biggest thing in the winter is the constantly changing conditions in the mountains. And a way you can monitor those changes on a daily basis is by going to the avalanche bulletin.
Well, the three weather factors that affect avalanche conditions the most are precipitation, whether it comes in rain or snow, temperatures, and wind. So if you can get a good handle on those factors and you combine that with some experience, you can start to produce a basic avalanche forecast. With regards to the public avalanche forecast, we're making a good estimation at the time of what the current conditions are and then projecting into the future based on experience, knowledge, and weather products. When you're trying to predict the weather, sometimes you're going to be wrong, and I think everyone pretty much knows that. If we extrapolate that back over to the snowpack and avalanches, there's a great analogy there. You know, it's one of these deals where, you know, if we're having a hard time pinpointing the weather, we can also say that it's pretty hard to pinpoint exactly where the avalanches are going to occur.
This is the Canadian Avalanche Danger Scale, which is an international standard that rates avalanche danger for backcountry recreationists. It's a 5-level scale. It starts with low, which is green, where natural avalanches are very unlikely and people triggering avalanches are unlikely. Travel is generally safe. Normal caution is advised. When you move into the moderate danger, natural avalanches are still unlikely, but people triggering avalanches becomes possible. This is when you want to start using extra caution in steeper terrain.
You know, you can absolutely get caught in an avalanche on moderate and low days. In my mind, a moderate avalanche danger is pretty serious, especially if you start pushing the terrain a little bit more.
Considerable danger. This is the danger where most backcountry recreational accidents happen. And this is when natural avalanches become possible, but people triggering avalanches is probable. So the next level is high, is red. Both natural and human triggering avalanches are likely. This is the point where when travel in backcountry areas is not recommended. Extreme danger is the red with the black border. That's when we expect widespread, naturally occurring avalanches. Travel should be confined to low-angle terrain, well away from any avalanche paths.
Well, in Canada, we divide up the danger rating into 3 bands. That's below tree line, and in the alpine. Each one of those bands gets a separate danger rating. And the reason why we do that is because conditions change with elevation.
My name is Pascal Hagley, and the Evaluator is a cart that helps people make better decisions when they go into avalanche terrain. There's 2 parts to the cart. On the front, there's a trip planner, and then on the back side, there's this list of obvious clues. So the trip planner basically helps you choose an appropriate trip for the current avalanche conditions. You use it when you're planning at home. So you read the bulletin from the avalanche.ca website and you get an avalanche danger rating for the area you're hoping to go into. On this chart here, green is normal caution, yellow is extra caution, and then red is not recommended. Basically take the danger rating that I have and I combine it with the terrain rating of the trip that I'm hoping to do. And then I see sort of where I end up on this card. And normally I try to stay in the green zone, and once it gets into the yellow, it definitely raises some flags for me to be extra cautious. Simple terrain is basically areas where there's lots of options to hide from avalanche hazard. You can travel through trees and you can completely avoid avalanche hazard in that area if you pick your routes carefully. Challenging terrain, you're more exposed to avalanche hazard and there's less options for you to choose. You're still sort of dealing just with one hazard or one path at a time. Complex terrain is generally high alpine where you can have multiple avalanche paths coming together and threatening one area. There's not really much options in terms of completely avoiding avalanche hazard. So it takes more skill basically to maneuver through this terrain and make sure that you don't expose yourselves too much.
You know, the danger ratings are just a snapshot picture of what's happening, but it doesn't really allow us to give a good description of what's actually going on. The text does. Really read all the way through that avalanche forecast. The beginning of the bulletins that the Canadian Avalanche Centre produces have primary concerns, and those are the driving factors we feel are most important behind the danger ratings and what concerns you the most. So if you pay attention to those first primary concerns, that'll really help you out in assessing the snowpack while you're out there. The travel advisory section in the bulletins is a place where we try to give advice to people. We say, hey, you know, this is how we'd like to see people use the terrain to stay safe. And we'll often make hints in there. So I think the meat of the forecast actually for people is in that travel advisory. The avalanche activity section in the avalanche bulletins describes recent avalanche activity in the mountains and what we think may happen down the road. If anywhere, that's where I'd be taking notes. We've been seeing avalanches on such and such aspect at this elevation. You know, when I read the weather section in an avalanche forecast, I always think, you know, how is the weather going to drive the avalanche conditions? By understanding what the weather is going to do for the day, it can help you figure out where you want to go in the mountains. So, is a storm coming in? How much will the avalanche danger rise? What sort of weak layers are being buried? And ultimately, it's all about terrain. It's what type of terrain can I go ride today?
Well, the correlation between a lot of skiing that most people like to do in prime avalanche terrain is that they're the same areas.
Good ski terrain is good avalanche terrain.
I think that understanding avalanche terrain and choosing your line while you move through the mountains is about the most important thing you can understand well if you're going to travel in the backcountry. Avalanche hazard is something that we can't control. It's just out there. But what we can control is risk. Because risk is about us and it's about where we're standing in relation to that hazard.
What's a reasonable risk? If you make the right choices by choosing the right terrain, given the conditions, you can reduce those to a completely reasonable margin. It is possible to ski powder every day. No matter how bad the avalanche conditions, we can ski it safely just by choosing the right terrain.
I'm Scott Flavelle, freelance avalanche consultant.
I'm Grant Statham. I'm the Mountain Risk Specialist for Parks Canada.
Your position in the terrain in relation to that avalanche hazard is the single most important thing you need to know out there. Where you're actually standing and how you're exposed to the avalanche hazard. Everything depends on where you're standing and when you're standing there. So we're going to discuss 5 main areas of learning that will help you move through the mountains safely. Recognizing avalanche terrain, common trigger areas, aspect in relation to sun and wind, elevation, and safe travel practices. So the thing about avalanche terrain is you can see it. And the mountains are giving you visible clues of where the avalanche terrain is and where avalanches are likely to run. So it's your job to be able to look up and see those clues.
One of the most important things to do in the backcountry is to keep your eyes open and be perceptive and observe, but not to just go blindly out into the mountains thinking you're all just these big sheets of white.
The very first thing you need to know about is the classic avalanche path. You see them everywhere. There's thousands of them in the mountains. It's those big strips where there's no trees down the mountainside. Avalanche paths have 3 main parts to them. The start zone, where the snow accumulates and the avalanche initiates. The track, where the avalanche gains speed and momentum and really gets cooking. And the run-out zone, and that's where the angle decreases and the snow begins to decelerate and kind of spread out and slow down.
We've just come into a great big open area here. You can see it's obviously an avalanche run-out zone, and there's a big path that goes way up there. What we have to worry about is large avalanches hitting us down here.
Destination with a nation, living life in overdrive. Liberation, elevation, do you want to enjoy the ride?
When you're in the forest, another really obvious clue for avalanche terrain is damaged trees.
So over there you can see that a number of those trees are missing branches on the uphill side. They're bent over, and there's one right there that's snapped in half. So that's very clear evidence that large avalanches have run through here in the past.
Slope angle and shape together are the 2 most important pieces to use when choosing your route through avalanche terrain. Generally, terrain steeper than 45 degrees is self-regulating, so that means constant sloughing. With that happening, big slabs don't really get a chance to build up. Now, it's not to say they don't happen, because they do on occasion, but the most important measure is between 25 and 45 degrees, which is about the same as a black diamond ski run at the hill. Once you're under 25 degrees, gravity's hard at work there, and generally that's not steep enough to see large slabs happening. It's not only important to know where an avalanche could occur, but what's going to happen if it does. You should always be looking down and asking yourself, what if? Areas you have to be particularly careful about, we call those terrain traps.
In essence, what a terrain trap is a spot where a small amount of snow from an avalanche can create quite a deep burial.
Some examples of terrain traps include gullies, creeks, depressions, or places you can get funneled into and buried deeply, or roads, lakes, flat areas where snow will pile up, alpine features like crevasses, bergschrunds, seracs, moraines, or cliffs. An important terrain trap that people often don't consider is trees.
You've got a stand of very thick, tight little balsam trees, okay, and they basically create a wall that the snow can pile up quite deeply against.
You know, a big part of the risk of getting caught in an avalanche isn't just getting buried, but also getting hurt. A lot of people get caught in avalanches and get hurt or killed and don't get buried. It's because they smash into stuff. Now we've talked about recognizing avalanche terrain. But if you want to move in a little bit closer and talk about your position in that terrain, you need to be able to pick out the common trigger points in the starting zones.
The convex roll is a shape that is like the outside of a beach ball. So the snowpack is actually under tension right on the convex roll. So it's stretching itself over the convexity, and if you just nick the convexity sometimes, that's all it takes to crack an avalanche.
When I come across a big convexity in the middle of a ski run that I expected or I didn't, the first thing I do is stop on top of it, give myself back enough room that I can actually see how I'm going to deal with it, and then I'll either choose to go through it, and that's a pretty common place to go one at a time, or else I might choose to go around it.
You can see if you drew a line sort of down and right from where they are, it's convex, but then it becomes concave down to that long traversing track. Generally, a concave slope is somewhat self-supported from the bottom up.
In a lot of cases, shallow rocky areas with variable snow depth, well, those are the kind of places where common trigger points exist and you can trigger avalanches.
Why are rocks generally weak spots in the snowpack? Well, not only are they just simply holes in the snowpack, but generally the ground is warmer than the air in the winter. So right around that rock, the snow crystals change and usually become quite sugary, and so they're weak. This is a classic slope with rocks sticking out through the start zone. So if you were to actually ski from rock to rock to rock, that would probably be the easiest way to trigger that particular slope.
So a place like that, I would personally stay clear of that terrain always. You'd never find me skiing in there. And the reason is that, first of all, it faces south, so it takes tons of sun. That means it's also windward, because prevailing wind comes from the south. And that makes for a shallow and variable snowpack.
Rocks are useful sometimes to show you where safe areas are. Like generally ridges are safe and they're usually rockier, so you can't just say rocks are dangerous. It's just when they're in a start zone like that that they're actually weaknesses.
Cornices are, I think, one of the bigger hazards in the alpine environment. Lots of people are killed by cornices. And one of the reasons is you can't see them when you're above them. And when they fail, they're big and they're stiff, and so the fracture line spreads way back. It's not uncommon to be sucked off a 5-degree slope if you're near a cornice.
When you're approaching your cornice, you got to be really sure it's not going to break underfoot. You want to find a vantage point or a vertical wall that you've seen from somewhere else to make sure it's not overhanging. And if there's any doubt in your mind, you should be well back from the edge.
Cornices are a really good indicator of the direction of the wind and the snow transport.
In this case, if the wind came from the backside and most of the snow decelerated the lip, formed a cornice, and the rest of the snow fell down lower onto the slope. So you'd expect both a fragile cornice and a wind slab. The whole ridge is very skiable, modern, steep terrain. And there's some slopes that are much safer than others. Take, for example, the ones underneath the overhanging cornice noses. Those cornices fall off when you're not expecting you might be in the path. So your best lines for skiing this steep terrain is simply those chutes that don't have cornices above.
Leeward areas are generally on the back side of a ridge behind where the wind is coming from. So those are the kind of places where the wind deposits the snow it's been carrying. That's wind loading, and that's a common trigger area. So watch out on the back side of ridges. The next major point is aspect. Two major contributors to the avalanche hazard are the sun and the wind, and that's why we pay attention to the aspect. The aspect is the direction that the slope is facing. As the sun moves across the sky through the day, there's predictable patterns in which the sun is going to affect the snow.
These are all due south facing. They've been getting sun since the sun came up in the morning till it sets in the evening. So those get radically altered by the sun. The east slopes are affected in the morning and the west slopes in the afternoon, and the south slopes are generally affected all day long. But as you look out around at the glaciers, the Spearhead Range, everywhere that's in the shadow right now in the middle of the day is northerly facing, so northeast, north, or northwest. And some of those slopes won't see a lick of sun all day. When the sun hits the snowpack, the snow starts to warm up. It's becoming more viscous, like a piece of toffee stretching down the slope. And if it gets really sunny and warm, then the snow grains actually start melting and becoming water-like, and then they have no strength at all, like a big pile of loose peas that want to slide down the mountainside. Typically, shaded snowpacks are often stronger than solar aspects.
North-facing terrain we like in some way because it's shaded. It doesn't get any sun on it, so we don't have sun crust problems, and generally it doesn't heat up. What it does do is that shade will make instabilities persist on those aspects, things that are buried in the snow that don't disappear when the snow settles because it's so cold in there. So the steeper the slope, the more it takes the sun. The bottom part of the bowl is not very steep. That's probably 15 degrees down there, so that's not going to have a lot of sun effect on it, and it probably doesn't have much sun crust on it. But if you tilt up onto the side where those point releases are, that's probably 35 to 40 plus degrees up there. That's going to probably have sun crust on it today, and that snow is going to be getting moist and taking real sun effect because it's steeper.
There's patterns with how the wind affects the snow as well. So try to get a handle on where the wind is coming from and how it's deposited on the terrain you're traveling through.
Something to keep in mind about wind, lots of times if you read the bulletin it talks about certain aspects to be careful of, which is really important. That's key information. Prevailing wind is a funny thing though, because southwest wind prevails up high, but there's always what we call local wind effect down here. So when you get down to this level and the wind comes ripping through here, what it's doing is funneling its way around all these terrain features. So you can't necessarily use just a general wind direction as a measure. You got to feel each one and figure out the wind patterns of the local terrain that you're working through.
Indicators included in the snow surface can tell you which direction local winds are blowing, and that can tell you which way the snow is being transported. Let's take a look at the drifts. You can see which way the snow has been drifting overnight. You can get a look at which way the fresh recent cornices have been built. You can feel it under your feet while you're walking up and changing different aspects and get a feel for how the snow is loading on this terrain.
Windward terrain is a slope that faces directly into the wind, so the wind presses right into it and oftentimes strips the snow from it. Leeward terrain is terrain that's on the other side of the wind, so the wind often slows down and deposits snow on top of it. So it's on the back side of the wind.
Fetch areas where the snow is collected, moved by the wind, and put into the lee area. The fetch area just on the other side of that corner, just over my shoulder, is stripped of snow. And not 3 meters further into the lee, the snowpack can be up to 3 meters deep.
The classic version of wind loading is the wind comes over the ridge and deposits it on the other side, but what's most common is cross-loading, and that's when wind blows across a slope and loads it at a variable depth across the slope. So that's a really easy place to trigger an avalanche because there's a wind load and there's variable depth on the slab, so you really got to watch out for cross-loaded terrain. Now let's take a look at elevation and how the changing elevations affect the avalanche hazard.
Today we're here at Rogers Pass on this beautiful day, and our goal today is to do a ski tour up into the Alpine. We've checked the public avalanche bulletin, we've done our pre-trip planning, and now we're ready to go. You're beeping, and you're beeping too. First place we're going to find ourselves is below tree line. And here we are. So far, no problems from avalanches. There's no avalanche terrain above us. It's common that hazard is less below tree line, and generally that's because there's less snow down here and the wind doesn't affect the snow as much. The tree's protected. Thick forest cover will prevent avalanches, but as soon as you start to get glades that are generally opening up for quite good skiing and you got lots of spacing in the trees, that's when you can start to think about avalanches happening. Think about the consequences of being caught in an avalanche. What's below you if you're going to trigger one? Is it a smooth rut out, or are you going to get smashed into a big pile of trees? So you do have to be quite careful below tree line still. But right now, we're below tree line with no avalanche terrain. Our risk is low. The minute we step into an avalanche path or we change locations at all, our risk is going to change. And that's why we're continually evaluating. And we're going to have another look up here just around the corner. We're in the transition zone between the big forest down low and the alpine conditions that we see up high. Tree line is more of a concept than a place. It occurs at different elevations, but really we have to be careful there because that's where the snowpack makes significant changes. Avalanche hazard is generally higher at tree line and in the alpine, and the reason for that is there's more snow up here and there's a lot more wind. And those are two of the big three contributors to avalanche hazard. So we see larger avalanches and it's easier to trigger them in areas of tree line and above. As we start moving from here up, we're going to be thinking about different things and looking at how the snow works with the terrain. You guys ready to go poke up in the alpine?
I'll poke you in the alpine.
The alpine is a really complex place. There's lots of stuff up here, ranging from big open bowls to glaciated terrain, cliffs, cornices, you know, all that kind of stuff lives up here. For me, being in the alpine is all about seeing where I'm going. Some of the things we think about up here are how we expose ourselves to this terrain. Alpine terrain is often roly-poly with lots of convex rolls and convoluted places. And I kind of look at it as an opportunity. When I see, you know, a big open snowfield, I think, wow, there's this blank canvas. I got to put a good line through there. That's on the way up and down. Well, the alpine is, of course, way more exposed to the elements. So there's more snow with elevation, there's more wind,
and generally it's colder up here. So we see way more wind loading, and we see a ton of variation in the snow cover, and that's possibly the most important thing from an avalanche perspective, because right over there might be 1 meter of snow, and just over that roll there could be 4 meters of snow. And it's the difference in snow depth that creates this dramatic variation, and is what causes us big troubles when trying to predict avalanches up here. So now we've got a sense of how to evaluate our position in the terrain and how we might want to move from point A to point B. So let's take a look at safe travel practices so we can make that happen.
There's some safe practices for traveling in the backcountry that are really going to reduce your risk and increase your longevity. The rule of thumb is not to be on the same avalanche slope as somebody else. And you can minimize that by spreading out, skiing one at a time, waiting in safe spots. Look at that spot where they stopped. It's a high point of land. It's well away from the slope. If that slope were to avalanche, it would not reach them.
When you're skiing a big line, there's things to think about. You need to know where your safe points are on the face if anything happens. Island of safety is, it's something that's a little bit higher up, so if something goes, it's going to go around it. You need to have all those things in your head and know where they are before you drop.
Anytime I deal with avalanche terrain, if at all possible, I want to be on top of it. But right now we're on a ridge crest, and that's the best place we could possibly be because it's high ground, so all the avalanche terrain falls underneath us. And that's the key. Anytime you can take the high ground, make sure you find your way there.
A ski cut can help you in your control program, or it can get you into a lot of trouble. Ski cutting, you're going across the top of the start zone and you're aiming for a safe spot. If you're doing it at the right time and place, will release at your ski. It'll break below you and you'll traverse out to the side, whereas if you're skiing downslope, you continue down a turn or two and it all breaks above you, and then you're caught in the avalanche.
And I'm going to be pushing downhill with my left foot. There we go. Keeping my right foot up on safe ground where it's not going to slide.
So, safe travel practices. Ski one at a time, stop in safe spots, travel on high ground, put a ski cut into a slope before you drop into it. So now we're going to move into learning a bit more about the snowpack, and that's going to help us predict avalanches.
Well, I just hear there's a lot of rumble and a lot of snow, and it's no place you want to be at that time. Just about the one a few weeks ago where the one guy busted his tailbone, but that's all hearsay you get working at the gas station. But no, I've never been in an avalanche, and I've never seen one except for like on the History Channel or Discovery or something.
So predicting when and where avalanches are going to occur is tricky. Avalanches are an erratic phenomenon. We get certain clues when we travel. We look for certain things in the snow, and then we got to make a decision that'll minimize our risk. We basically have to stick the snow on the terrain in our mind, visualize it, and travel our way through it where we minimize our risk so we're not in the line of fire of an avalanche. Three big factors of being observant, of being aware. First is common signs of instability. What do we see when we're traveling? What's around us? It's amazing how many people trigger avalanches and then just keep walking right on into the next one. Then there's consideration of the snowpack. What's the structure of the snow below you? Then we're thinking about triggers. What's out there to trigger it? Naturally, the weather. Loading, new snow, wind loading, temperature, stuff like that. Or human triggers, us. Common signs of instability we see, whoops.
Settling of the snow is basically what woofing is. It's it can happen when you're just on the flats and you're skiing across, skinning or whatever, and you just hear the snow settle. And it makes kind of a woof sound. And when you hear that, that's a red light. That means the snow is not stable.
Well, if you're skiing along and you get a whoomp, you'll feel it. You'll feel it, whoop, like a little earthquake. go straight to your guts. You get a big one, it'll go straight to your bowels. Shooting cracks around our skis. Hollow sounds as we travel, walking over a hard slab. How does our ski cut the snow? Are we getting a nice sharp edge? Are we triggering anything? You look at your avalanches and you see where are the avalanches occurring, on what aspect, what elevation band, how widespread are they? Is this something isolated or is this something you're seeing all over the mountains?
The obvious clues is something that you can use once you're actually on the trail, and it basically has 7 key questions of things that you should observe when you're out in the backcountry. This acronym ALP Truth, to make it easier for people to remember those 7 clues. A stands for avalanches in the last 48 hours. L stands for loading in the last 48 hours. P stands for path, if you're in an obvious avalanche path. T stands for terrain traps that will make it more severe if you actually got caught in an avalanche here. R stands for rating, whether the rating is considerable or higher currently. U stands for unstable snow. And then TH stands for thaw instability. It's not really a go, no-go decision. It's more about sort of how much experience do you actually need to manage avalanche hazard under these conditions. And generally we say that 2 or less clues present is sort of normal caution. 3 and 4, you want to start to be very careful about your decision making, and then 5 or more, that's a lot of clues, and I think most people should turn around.
So you've got to put all this together now. You've got to sort of think about it as a whole. And you've got to think about what parts are particularly relevant today. An easy winter, funnily enough, is one that you just get storm after storm after storm. Uniform weather, never changes, lots of load. Sure, there's a potential surface instability all the time, but it's a lot easier to pick than a winter that's broken up by small snowfalls, long period of clear weather, windy period, another snowfall, another clear period. When you get those winters that are broken up by sharp changes, then you start to get these tricky layers forming.
It's kind of hard to explain, I guess, but just like to be in there in like on-track POW and just like using all your senses to go down the run like that, and all your senses are, you know, like satisfied at that point with everything that's going on, you know, like you're feeling the snow, you're like seeing the terrain in front of you. You don't just feel the snow like on your skis and stuff, it's like hitting you in the chest, and you know, you're hearing how the snow sounds, you know, like this, I don't know, it sounds kind of crazy, but it can be like a super powerful experience when you have like that day, you know, and everything is like awesome, and that's what's going to get you in trouble as well at some point too, is that wanting to get that feeling, you know.
You got to go back 30 years, but I was working in an air-conditioned office, and that was it. I needed a change, and so I was looking for an application of science that was going to get me outdoors, and this is where I am, and I think it's a pretty good choice. Hey, I'm Bruce Jamieson. I direct an avalanche research program at the University of Calgary. I've been doing this for 24 years now, and I'm still learning. I'm learning about snowpack, and I'm learning about terrain. It just takes time. Mother Nature creates layers in the snowpack. Each different snowstorm has slightly different properties, and then sometimes we grow particular kinds of crystals on the snow surface. So each of these different layers, whether they fall out of the sky or form on the snow surface, they then evolve over time and create these different layers within the snowpack. For a slab avalanche, you need some kind of cohesive snow layers, then you have a weak snow layer, and underneath that you need a stiffer snow layer. Sometimes that stiffer snow layer is a crust. and a lot of those crusts form near the surface, either from rain and we get a rain crust, and we get this hard layer that potentially can form a bed surface when it gets buried in the snowpack. The same thing can happen when the sun hits the slope, warms the slope up until it starts to melt, and then when that freezes we get this hard layer that is the snow surface, and later when that gets buried, that buried sun crust is potentially the bed surface for slab avalanches. Surface hoar is winter dew. When it cools off at night and the moisture's got to go somewhere from the sky, and particularly the snow near the ground, it deposits as frost on the snow surface. There's a huge variety of snow crystals that you deal with. This kind's a little bit sparkly, the other kind over there is a little bit chalky, and they all have a different feel to them. And spend a lot of time in the mountains and you learn about these different kinds of layers and snow crystals. The weak layers that form in the snowpack do eventually strengthen. In midwinter, it's normally a process of accumulating more and more snow layers on top, and they gradually push down and they push the crystals together within these previously weak layers. It's a very slow process, especially if the crystals are big, but eventually those weak layers will stabilize, and then we can move on to some slopes we may have been avoiding for a while. Another process happens in the springtime. As the snowpack warms up to 0 degrees, we get a little bit of meltwater forming in the snowpack, and that connects the crystals together, and when that freezes we get a really strong layer. So in the springtime, when the upper part of the snowpack's frozen, you can kick steps, you can go up really steep slopes, you wait till the top few centimeters softens up into corn, and you can rip down that, and you can be fairly confident that you've got a good snowpack and you're not too worried about avalanches.
Change is what it's about. Well, we want to talk about intensity or rate of change in the weather. The faster the rate, the more likely it is to fail. Poking around as you're traveling, you can get some good signs of the snowpack structure. As you step off your skis, does it seem like it supports you and then suddenly you break through? When you're skiing along, is it highly variable? Do you go from top to poof underneath? Or when you're poking along with your pole as you travel, does it break through? So you've got hard over soft. You want to think about that structure. Are there big changes? Big hard layer, soft layer, hard layer. Slab, weak layer, bed surface. When we're traveling, we've got to be thinking all the time about what's out there for triggers. Common natural triggers you'd think about, first it'd be load. Snowfall overnight, 30 centimeters, 50 centimeters, that's a lot of load. Wind loading, snow blowing onto a slope, that can trigger a slope. Sun coming on a slope, the slab gets weaker as it gets sun on it. It changes the surface of the snow. Rain on snow can be almost an instant avalanche trigger. Rain on snow gives you two things. It gives you new load and it gives you weakness. Cornices are those big overhangs of snow that form on the lee side of sharp ridges. Now those cornices break off now and then. When they roll down the hill, that's like rolling a Volkswagen down the hill or maybe a school bus down the hill sometimes. When Cornish chunks hit the slope, that's as good or better than a bomb hitting the slope. Rapid temperature change, rapid warming, that can trigger avalanches or make them easier for you to trigger. Rapid warming makes the snow weak, makes the slab easier to trigger. Common human triggers that we might see out here, well, that's us skiing or boarding down a slope through a starting zone. That's the most common human trigger. Or we're high marking with our sled, going right up into the starting zone. That's a pretty common human trigger these days. Or we're going to go and launch 10 meter, 20 meter, 30 meter cliff. You're going to hit the snow pretty hard. That's a pretty good test of that slope. Right now, I'm walking along on this meadow on a fairly firm crust. Fairly loose snow on the top, only about 10 centimeters, 5 centimeters. Doesn't tell me too much. But just back there in the trees, I fell through up to my waist in the facets. And we got some nice whoops in the sheltered part in the trees there. So you've got to be flexible. You got to see what you need to see when you get a chance to see it. There's a number of tests that you can do, simple, quick tests as you're traveling. The hand shear test, pull probe test, ski cut, jumping on a small roll, see if you can get it to go. Block tests. cutting off blocks of snow and rolling them down the hill. So hand shears are useful for the surface layers. They're quick. So I can just cut out a little block here right down through those 2 layers. Then I'm just going to stick my hand in here and see what happens. Whoop. I got a 7-planar shear on that lower layer. So with the pole probe test, all I'm doing here is poking down with my pole to see either changes. As that goes down in about this far down in these surface layers, it gets stiff and then softer. Boom! Just goes away to nothing. When you're traveling, you also want to think about your ski penetration or your foot penetration when you get off your skis when you stop. How far into the snow are you penetrating? If you're breaking trail up to your waist, you better know that there's a lot of unconsolidated snow around, and that could easily produce soft slab avalanches. But sometimes when you're traveling, you have a chance to go by little mushrooms of snow supported on rocks or tree stumps or on top of trees. You can poke around at those, and sometimes you'll see some of the snow break off. Get it a little bit more complicated, you can get into the snowpack, dig a snow profile, do things like compression tests. Oh, there we go. Shovel shear test. The roots block test. You cut out a 2-meter wide block, 1.5 meters up the hill, to create a kind of a mini slab which you can test with your skis. So I'm going to approach the block, step down, knee bend, a little jump. Whoa! Site selection is critical. Where you dig, where you look. So when we're building up our knowledge of the snow, you don't go out in the middle of a big line and dig a hole. That's not how you do it. You build up, build your knowledge over time, poke around, look at some small spots. You have to remember that snowcraft takes time to learn. It's just like terrain. You got to get out there, you got to travel in the mountains, and you've got to practice. So it's a fine line making these decisions out there when you're traveling. It's not as if there's some angel looking over your shoulder who's going to protect you. You got to roll in a little caution, a margin of safety when you're traveling. Oh, there it goes, it snapped.
If you could dig yourself out of an avalanche, we wouldn't have a problem here. But you can't. When an avalanche stops, it sets up like cement. Everything we've learned so far should have prevented this. But if something goes wrong, this is what we do. Even if it's just your legs buried, you're gonna have to dig yourself out. Your friend or friends are buried and they're running out of air. The clock is ticking. And you are their only chance of survival. Hello? 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 This is something you have to understand. Your friend might be breathing, but not for long. Where the heck are they? They could be here, or here, or here, or here. I don't know. Or there could be two burials, or more. Make sure everybody has a shovel and a probe. And an avalanche transceiver like this one. These things are meant to find each other, but they won't do it for you. If you have to experience this, it'll probably be the scariest moment of your life.
My name's Rocket Miller. I work on the ski patrol at Lake Louise Mountain Resort in Lake Louise, Alberta. I want to talk a little bit about companion rescue. There's 3 of us out here today, and we only exposed 1 person on a slope, and lo and behold, the unexpected has happened, and we've had an involvement. There's a good sequence of events that should follow in the event that you have an involvement with an avalanche and somebody is buried. Number 1, assign a leader. You need a sounding board. Communication can often break down in a rescue, whether it's organized rescue or just companion rescue. Number 2, take the time to make a call out. You may have a radio and be able to contact another party. You may just have a telephone, and cell phone coverage is good there. By all means, make the call.
I copy that, and the avalanche just happened.
Number 3, you need to assess further danger. Further danger might be additional snow above the fracture line. Maybe there's a cliff band. Your own safety is now of primary importance. Number 4, best case scenario is you were able to keep an eye on your friend for as long as possible before he's under or she's under the snow. Number 5, the stages of physically going after him. Switch your transceiver into receive and make sure everybody else in your group has switched to receive also. If you have further danger and have accepted the risk of the further danger and you have the manpower, post somebody to watch out over you. I do have my transceiver out and it's on receive, and I'm going to enter the search area now. In this case, I'm searching from above. So I'm going to use the efficiency of staying on my skis, and I'm going to zigzag back and forth, no further than 40 meters apart at my widest. That gives me a 20-meter search radius, which is pretty well optimal for any transceiver on the market today. Now I do have to focus on the last scene point. The person buried is likely below the last scene point. Thinking terrain traps, most likely burial areas, whether we can see him or any visual clues on the surface. Okay, I'm at a surface clue here. It's a ski pole sticking out. Based on my last scene point and this ski pole, I've got a bit of a trajectory and a most likely burial area. I am relying on my beacon, but I don't want to pass this. Even though I don't have a strong signal yet, I'm going to pull on this ski pole and make sure there's not a hand attached to it. If I had more people here, someone would come and probe all around here. But like I said, I want to make sure that his hand's not attached to it, and my beacon is my best bet. So I'm going to carry on here. Okay, I'm picking up a signal now. Let's just pause here a second and discuss beacons. This is a digital beacon. Other beacons are analog beacons. Some beacons provide you with both. The thing about beacons is they send out signals, and they also receive signals, transmit, receive. But the signals they're sending out come out of your beacon in a monkey ear shape on both sides, like this. But they also come out this way and this way, so consider it three-dimensional sphere. So despite which way you're buried, they're going to send a signal up through the surface of the snow to the receiving beacon. The signal is going to bring you in on a curve. We call that a flux line or induction line. The digital beacon, I'm focusing on two things. I have a distance and I have an arrow to follow. So I'm going to follow that arrow, follow that light, dead center of my beacon, and watch my numbers get smaller. I'm following this induction line in. Flux line, they curve. So I'm curving with it, keeping my arrow in the middle and watching my numbers go down. There we go. Okay. Yep, now I'm getting close. Now I want to move into my pinpoint search. Kicking my skis off here. Get my beacon low to the ground. This beacon's making lots of noise right now. And here we go. I'm going to work in a grid pattern here. I want to mark a strong spot here. Keep going until I notice it getting weaker. Definitely weaker here. Back over the strong spot. Yeah, definitely strong there. Okay, weaker here. Back to the strong. I want to go back this way, make sure that I'm really close. Okay, weaker here, back up this way. Okay, even stronger here now, that's great. Up here further, no, not stronger, strong. Definitely, right here, strongest spot. This is where I want to start probing, right there. At this stage of the game, I've marked it. Visually, for now, I got to get my probe out and probe. My probe's ready to go. Now, there is a systematic way of probing to your first spot. Get an idea how deep that snow is. Okay, that deep. Now I want to spiral around it. 30 centimeters apart. So I'm spiraling around, getting a little bit wider each time. That's good. I ought to be getting close here. Oh, okay, I got something here, strike. Now we're shoveling. Now what I want to do with shoveling here is get an idea how deep that person is. I don't want to dig straight down. That's tough digging. I want to start in from downhill if you're on a slope, or at least from some side, pointing towards where you think the end of your probe is, because that's where your buried friend is. So start back here. This stuff can be darn hard. And hard, tough digging.
Hey, okay? On up.
Yeah, if you do find yourself caught in an avalanche, first thing, you want to be yelling avalanche so everyone knows that something has happened, that the snow is starting to move.
Big Abby! Keep an eye on it, bud! We need help!
And they can either get out of the way or at least keep their eyes on you and watch where you're going to go. There's pretty much two options, depending on where you are on the slide. If you're at the front of the slide and you think you can get ahead of it and cut out and get out of its path to a safe zone, that's sort of one of your best options. The other option, if you're at the top of the slide and it's mostly below you, you can try and get off of it and dig into the bed surface. Just being able to like backpedal and jump off of the slide surface and get back on the bed surface, the snow that isn't moving, and just dig in and let what's moving get away from you. If you do find yourself caught in an avalanche, best advice, just protect your head and face. And I've been told that swimming works, and try and get to the surface and just kick your skis off and just not get anchored down. If you feel yourself slowing down, you might want to try and create an air pocket with your arms in front of your face, or if you feel that you're at the sort of the surface of the slide, try and get a hand up out of the snow so that your buddies can see you.
There's a misconception that wardens can come to the rescue effectively in an avalanche accident. It's essentially up to you to provide your own companion rescue, because time is of the essence, and quite often it can take us up to 2 hours to respond to an event.
Accidents have happened in the past, and they're going to happen again. That's just a fact. If you dedicate the time to learn the various methods to move safely through the mountains, it's going to work for you. There's always risk, and you're always at risk when you're in the mountains, but the methods work.
People often don't know how to get the knowledge that they need. Reading a book is a good part of getting that. It's not good enough. Watching this film isn't good enough. And the only thing that's good enough is getting out there and getting hands-on experience. I think the best way is to sign up for a certified course don't waste time, and before you do, it's well worth it. You'll feel better when you're out there, because if you're ever doing something and you don't know how to do it, you get those tentative feelings, you don't trust yourself. You shouldn't do something if you don't trust yourself doing it, because that's when bad things happen.